Just a few days ago, I was sitting at the home of Mrs. Uri Flegman and the Felders after the Shiva for their dear and beloved father, a longtime White Shul member, Honorary Shimon Felder, Olav Shalom. And Aaron Felder, the son, shared with me that his father once asked him, "My dear Aaron, if you could journey back into any point in history, any moment in all of Jewish history that you could be privy, you could be witness to, tell me, Aaron, where would you want to be?" And Aaron said, I told him the expected answers. I'd love to be by Yetzias Mitzrayim at Kriyas Yamsuf. Perhaps by Maimon HaSinai, the grand revelation, wherein Klal Yisrael received to Rasinam HaKadoshah. And his father said, Aaron, I hear, but that's not where I would want to be. So tell me, Daddy, where would you go if you can pick any moment in history? And Shimon Felder responded, I would want to be there when the Yidden were liberated from Auschwitz, where I could see Yidden, Erlich Yidden, who were watching their families sent to the gas chambers, when they miraculously survived due to Rachamei Shamayim and they saw their entire world crumble. They lost their families, their jobs, their lives, their entire reality faded throughout the course of the Holocaust, and still they held on to Yiddishkeit. If I could just see those Yidden, they still held on tight. Going into a gas chamber with Shema Yisrael on their lips. To see those Yidden again, to speak with them. How to hold on to Emunah even in the darkest of times. And that caused me to reflect. Can you imagine the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Befrat, especially the Churban Bayis Rishon? You had the Aron, you had the Luchas Eidos, you had the Ashros HaShechina. Miracles that Klal Yisrael encountered day after day, living with the Shechina. And then Churban Bayis Rishon took away all those miracles, stripped the Shechina from our midst, and the Binyan HaMefuar B'Yosef, the grand, the Beis HaMikdash, destroyed, razed to the ground, burnt before our eyes. We lost everything. This was the golden era of Klal Yisrael's history. How in the world do you hold on? To meet those Yidden who still clung tenaciously onto their Emunah, their Bitochen in Hashem Yisbarach. Are we longing for those days? We know that whenever we refer to the Ribono Shel Olam, and we're not allowed to enunciate the Shema Mefurish, Yud Kei Vav Kei, so we typically, in the course of our conversations, our shiurim, we refer to Hashem Yisbarach as Havaya, configuration of the letters comprising the Shema Mefurish. So we switch around the letters ever so slightly. It's not Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's Hey Vav Yud Hey Havaya. And Rav Tzaddik Cohen in his pre-Tzaddik Rosh Chodesh Av in the first Maimer quotes of Bnei Yissaschar. The Din of a Rebbe writes in his Bnei Yissaschar in his Mamori Tamazav, Why is it that whenever we refer to Hashem, we call the Shem HaMefurish Havaya? Writes the Bnei Yissaschar, because Havaya is the only configuration of those 4 letters that has another meaning. If we were merely to intermingle the letters comprising the Shem HaMefurish, we would still know it's a reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore we still want to refrain from coming up with any other configuration. But Havaya from the Sugyas and Kedushin, Makish, Havaya, Liyitziyah. Havaya coming into marriage, Ma'aseh Kedushin coming into things. Havaya, hey, Vav, Yud, writes the Bnei Yissaschar, it has another meaning. So you know what? Since it has another meaning, let's use that terminology as a reference to the Eibush. But writes the Ger Rosh Hashiva of Shol Alter, I'll give you perhaps another interpretation. That same Bnei Yissaschar tells us that every month of the year we know Al-Pi, the Arizal Al-Pi, the Mekubalim, every one of the 12 months corresponds to a different configuration of the Shem HaMefurish of the letters Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. And the tziruf of the letters corresponding to this month, the Chodesh Av, comes from Devar and Parshas Kisava, Parachav Zayin, Posuk Tes. Haskes Shema Yisrael Hayo. Haskes, be attentive and listen closely, Shema Yisrael today. Hey Vav Yud Hey, the Rashi Tevis. Right, so Shol Alter, that means that the tziruf of Hey Vav Yud Hey is the last tziruf that we had, that we experienced before Nebuchadnezzar Melech Babel took down our Beis HaMikdash. The last relationship we had with Hashem was as Havaya. That's which represented that closeness, that proximity to the divine. The greatest, closest we ever had. And Yerushalayim HaKadosh, in his land, in his building, his Dira B'Tachtonim, witnessing the miracles, living with an Aron HaBris. Our last close relationship was between us, Bnei Yisrael, and Hashem as Havaya. The tziruf of the month of Av before Tes Av changed the course of Jewish history forever. That's how we want to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we had those glorious days, that golden era in our history. Hey Vav Yud and Hey Haskes Shema Yisrael Hayom. Listen, Klal Yisrael, and listen to the messages that brought about its destruction. Listen in on the messages that can help us get to that Beis HaMikdash back. There was one person who almost saved it all. As we turn our attention momentarily to the 11th of the Kiddush, we have a Kiddush that's considered the most important Kiddush because Yirmiyah Navi told us, I gave you Megillah Seicha that we learned last night, many of them in to learn it again this morning. I gave you those chapters comprising the book of Lamentations, and I'm going to give you one Kiddush that I, Yirmiyah Navi, will pen myself, because I'm telling you, we almost could have saved the Bayis Rishon. Yoshio HaMelech, one of the greatest tzaddikim, the greatest king we ever had, who created a massive tshuva movement, a massive revolution. It was his wicked grandfather Menashe who had avodah zarah, idolatry spread throughout the land. Menashe said, I'm also an Ovid avodah zarah, but lo and behold comes Yoshio HaMelech at the age of 8. After his father was murdered, he ascends to the throne and he reigns for the next 31 years. In his 18th year, Chilkiah, then the Kohen Gadol, was making repairs, renovation, Shiputzim on the Beis HaMikdash. came across a Sefer Torah. They opened it up, and it was reading open to the pages to the posuk in the Tochachav Kisavo Orash Oliyakim Estibriya Torah Zos Lasas Isa, and that inspired Yoshia Melech. I have to do tshuva. I have to save Klal Yisrael. We have to bring about a massive tshuva revolution throughout the land, which is exactly what he set out to do. And he thought that Klal Yisrael fully repented. Lo and behold, there was still a minority faction, still Ovei, Avodah Zorah in the land. And the Osran Falanecha wanted to wage war against Assyria. And he said, Yoshia Melech, can I pass through your land? I don't want to wage war against you. Nothing with Klal Yisrael. I'll only ask you permission. Can I go through the land of Eretz Yisrael? And Yoshia Melech thinking, we're already at our utopian stage. We had a massive tshuva revolution. The land is replete with tzaddikim, with tamidei chachamim. And thus we have a promise. No goyim are going to come through our land for the purpose of war. But he was mistaken. And it was Yirmiyahu Hanavi who said, no, there's still Ovdei Avodah Zorah in your midst. I plead, I beg you, Yoshia Melech, the tzaddik that you are, but unfortunately the land is still not fully righteous. Allow him to go, but he didn't listen. He then went to Cholda Aviyah. And maybe a woman shall have a different perspective, but Cholda echoed the same sentiment as Yirmiyah. Do let him in, let Pharaoh Necho in. And still, the adamant Yoshio says, no, I'm going to go and wage war with him. He didn't listen to the Nevi'im, to the Gedolei Hadar. And in this kiddush before us, Yirmiyahu Hanavi laments one individual, one tzaddik, Yoshia Melech, could have saved the Beis HaMikdash. He failed to listen. He was killed by Pharaoh Necho, 300 arrows piercing his body. But at the last moment, in his last breath, he recognized his mistake. I didn't listen to Yirmiyahu Hanavi. I didn't listen, heed the call of Cholda Aviyah. And here we mourn the loss of Yoshio Melech, the great king, the massive tzaddik, and the revolution he engendered. We mourn that with his demise, his tragic death, came the last obstacle before the Churban Bayis Rishon. And we have to learn the all-important lesson of what it means to listen to the Gedolim. If the tziruf of the name of Hashem for this month is Haskei Shema Yisrael Hayom, then this is the month that beckons us to listen more closely to our messages, to wake up. And we can have a tzaddik like Yoshia Melech, who created such a tshuva revolution, who single-handedly turned upside down the entire Eretz Yisrael, and single-handedly could have saved and stopped the Churban Bayis Rishon. Then oh, what a consequential lesson to be gleaned from Kinei and Aleph. To heed the call of Gedolei Yisrael, to not question. To not to be mavazah the Gedolei Yisrael when they come out with certain statements and people say, the Gedolim, they don't know what they're talking about. For El Yisvei could tell Rabbi Yaakov Bender, look at Madison Square Garden, I could fill the Madison Square Garden with all of my enemies, with all the people that have tried to disgrace and deride me. And people questioned when we lost that Torah from Moshe Feinstein, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, the Blushim, Rav Urim, and Rav Hutner. And Rav Shimshon Cher told me that he asked his father, Rav Moshe Cher Zechatzadik Levrocha, when he was at the helm of Yagudas Yisrael, and he knew he was easily machriya himself before the likes of the Gedolei Olam, Rav Moshe, Rav Yaakov, etc. And then it transitioned to a new generation, Rav Eli Yisvei, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. Those individuals who were Chaverim, Yedidim, with Ramosha Sharon Yeshiva. And his son Rosh Shimshon Sher asked his father, how are you machniya yourself? He's a wonderful Talmidei Chachamim, but they're not Ramosha Feinstein. They're still not the Bush of a Rebbe, they're not Rabbi Yaakov. They're not Rabbi Aaron Kohler. How you machniya yourself? And Moshe Sher responded when they assumed the mantle of leadership. I noticed right away the siyata d'shmaya that they got. I saw and I lived daily in the office, Yiftach Bedoro, Kishmul Bedoro. Perhaps they're not as great as Friyad Kedoros. But Hashem sends every respective generation the leaders to guide them that are matim, that are apropos to that given generation. And woe is to the individual who is mavaza. The Gedolim, Yoshio, Melech Lahavdil didn't heed the call of Yirmiyah Hanofi, and look at the tragedy that ensued. Oh, what can happen when people are Mavazeh, Gedolei Olam, Gedolei Yisrael, Talmidei Chachamim. Has Yesu Shema Yisrael Ayom, let's take out the monumental lesson. To listen to the calls of Gedolei Yisrael, to not be Mavazeh. Frightening story. Rabbi Yechiel Spiro shares with us how as a young man Rabbi Levin learned in the city of Slonim. And one night, it was the night of Tisha, the Tzibur gathered in the shul to recite Megillah Seicha, to say the Kiddush. And on the way to shul, some of the townsfolk noticed a group of the local youth, the boys who were troubled and lost. They invited in these young men to join them in saying Eicha Kiddush, but they shrugged off the invitation. Instead, they decided they were going to have some fun that night. So they started throwing little pebbles and debris at the shul windows. They still didn't get the attention they wanted, so they went to throwing rocks, shattering some of the shul windows in the process. And they still didn't stop with their fun. So to everyone's amazement, they tossed a barrage of pine cones into the shul. And they threw pine cones even at the Rav, and they struck Rav Charif, the Rav of the shul, in the head. And when the Rav was hit in the head by a pine cone, he began to cry, "Aye, the Beis HaMikdash is burning, I face me here. The Beis HaMikdash is burning." Within a couple of minutes, everything calmed down. The boys ran out of the shul. And a little while later, there was news that a fire broke out in town, spreading quickly from one home to the next. And while the majority of the people in those homes were saved, there were several young men who were trapped, screaming for help, but no one could save them. And after many hours, the fires were finally extinguished. The Chevra Kadisha made their way into the homes. And they removed the bodies of 4 young men. The crowd gathered and they sobbed softly, and it was time to identify the bodies, and to everyone's shock, the only 4 who were burned alive were the 4 boys who had thrown pine cones at the Rav. And so continued Rabbi Levin. Klal Yisrael had yet another churban over which to cry that night. They sat down on the floor and they cried through the Kiddush, and then went to bury the 4 young men. Right? So Spiro, look what can happen. The Mavazah, the Rabbonim, the Mavazah, the Talmidei Chachamim. And we have to ask ourselves, are we listening to the calls of Gedolei Yisrael? Do we make fun of our Rebbeim, our Morris when we come home? Do we make fun of different statements that we just don't understand? But how about saying we just don't understand? But we're not going to be Mavazah Gedolei Yisrael. Yoshio HaMelech, you could have listened to Yirmiyah Hanavi. could have heeded the call of Chol Aviyah. But he felt he knew better. Let's tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu we want a Beis HaMikdash back, and the only way it's going to come back, to listen, to revere our Gedolei Yisrael, to be machnia ourselves to their advice, to their wise, sagacious counsel. We need Talmidei Chachamim in the world. We needed the Rav Chaim Kaneskis, the Rav Yoshis, the Rav Arlem Steiners. And if we no longer have them, you're right, we might not have Baalei Ruach HaKodesh to that degree. And we don't have those tzaddikim who was Zochari Gili Eliyahu, but again, Yiftach B'doro Kishmol B'doro. Let's listen to our leaders, our manhigim. Let's tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu we're being Mekayim Haski Shema Yisrael Hayom today on Tisha B'Av. Havaya, we want our relationship back with you again. He writes and please HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Give us that bias. Give us that Hashos HaShechina. Give us that closeness once again. Ayakonin Yirmiyo HaYoshio.